Hello and welcome to the Cheese Room podcast. This is Brendan, your host for the show. It's the international break, so no games to review, but we do have a big game coming up. Joining me to look ahead to the North London derby, we have two guests, two Anglo-Australian guests. First up is Davo. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, no, very good, thank you. Great to be here, although I am in bushy Hertfordshire at the moment.
Yeah, Happy New Year, by the way. Sanatova?
Yeah, well done. You remembered it from 2 minutes ago.
Also delighted to be joined once again by a friend of the show, Max Rushden of TalkSport fame and also the Guardian Football Weekly. Welcome, Max. How are you doing?
Hi. Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. I'm all right. Thank you very much.
He's joining us very early there in Sydney, so thank you there. You got a coffee?
Well, I
or
mean,
tea
you say early, like it's 7:10 in the morning, but I have a 6-month-old child, so I've been up for a while.
Congratulations again on the birth of Ian Rushden. Can I ask? Well, the key question: did you name him Ian Rushden just to get a football pun in there, or because that's some dedication to your craft, really?
Well, his stage name is Ian. I don't think anybody calls their child Ian in real life anymore. But we just made a real conscious decision that we don't put anything of him on social media, and I don't know what. I mean, I have no issue with telling everybody what his name is. We just haven't done it because. Okay. It's just, in many ways, I think probably I reckon if you post one picture, then you'll just spend your life just constantly posting pictures. We just don't really want to be doing that. I spend waste enough time on social media anyway. So that is something that we should left out. So it's worth clarifying. I have not called my child Ian, but you're not the first person to actually think I called my child Ian. So it sounded like Ian Rushden. But that is very much a stage name.
Okay. Because you've referred to him a lot on TalkSport as Ian Rushden. I just assumed so. That's kind of a bit disappointed now. He's Ian Rushden. He is Ian Rushden.
Ian Rushden for everybody, yeah.
Well, we've got lots to get through. Max, I know you've just woken up there, so we'll ease you in.
Okay.
But I will forewarn you, there will be quite a few anecdotes about my friendship with Sandro.
That's totally fine.
Really? No, Max, it isn't fine. Believe you me.
Look,
I have one anecdote about Sandro that I can't tell, but it's quite funny.
Oh, really?
But yeah, it's not terrible. It doesn't reflect badly on Sandro, but it's not my story, and it is a story that I wouldn't tell in a broadcast environment.
Okay, fair. Okay, I'm a bit worried about one of my anecdotes now, but I'm going to tell it. So yes, you're now, as we just discussed, you're living in Australia. Last time you were on the pod, you did mention, in your words, that were you to have a child, it would have to be in Australia. So how has the move been? And you've managed to maintain work as well. Has it been a challenge? What's life been like for Max Rushden in Australia?
Yeah. It's been great. I mean, it's funny. Everybody's incredibly nice. It's such a cliche, isn't it? That, you walk around with a pram in Australia and everyone's like stops and, people stop you and they're not just completely insane and just have a nice chat and then get on with their day. And then we went back to London in June and literally little pram and we sort of turned a corner and bumped into someone. They just went, "Oh, fuck off." And we're like, that's London. And I sort of missed that. You sort of missed that grit a bit. Do you know what? It's been as seamless as I could imagine it could have been. And it's been incredibly lucky. And I always said to my wife, she's from Melbourne. And I said, look, if I ever she lived in London for 10 years. And I was like, look, if I ever get offered a job in Australia, we'll move. Safe in the knowledge that I could never really get offered a job in Australia because there's just not enough soccer for them or football content, right? There's the live football and that's it. They don't have shows before the game, show after the game, all this kind of stuff that I've done before. And then this company got the rights to the Champions League, Stan. It's a streaming service in Australia, which Dave probably knows about it and hopefully has. And he definitely got it now, Spurs in the Champions League. It's like Netflix, but it's just in Australia. And I know the guy who runs the football, and we got in touch. And I can't remember if I said it or he said it or something like, what about doing like pitch side from Europe? And I said, why don't I just come and do the whole thing? Thinking he'd go, "No, you're all right. We've got someone." He went, "Oh yeah, all right." And then it was like just around during the Euros in 2020, and I think the Euros just finished, and me and Jay were like just going on holiday. The Euros are quite like intense in terms of the pod. We're doing a pod every day. And then we're like, oh, we just could just relax and not think about work for 10 days. And basically, we're just getting an email, wake up to an email in the morning going, got an offer. And because Australia was locked down, it wasn't like something we could really spend time thinking about because there were like 2 available, like for the whole, like to get into Australia before the first game. And they said, we need you here from the start of the tournament. And so we were like, so we were on a beautiful Welsh beach called Rossley Beach. It's an absolutely beautiful place. It was so warm. Australia was locked down. The UK wasn't locked. My wife actually really loved London by the time we got the offer. And then we were like, well, if we don't do it now, we'll never do it. So we said, yes, book the flights. And then sort of 2 days later, I had to go and chat to The Guardian and chat to TalkSport and say, and they kind of known it might have happened. But I said, I'm going. Could I possibly keep all my work? Thinking that The Guardian had been remote for 2 years anyway because of the pod. We'd been doing it like you're doing it here. And actually the pod, in many ways, had improved because we could have guests from all around the world and we could have everyone in quality and all those kind of things. The radio, I thought, well, look, that's mad. You can't do, it's Saturday morning and Sunday morning in the UK, you're in Australia. But they said, look, we'll give it a try. And what's amazing is, I'm in this little studio in Melbourne now. I had one in Sydney. The technology is, you wouldn't know. We don't lie about where I am. I'm really honest about where I am. We just don't make a big deal of it. There's no reason to. For example, this coming Saturday, we'll be talking about the North London Derby a lot. We won't be talking about, the fact that I went for a walk and it's spring and, I ate some Vegemite or whatever. Like, it's just irrelevant. So we don't lie about it. So, like, when I went to the MCG to watch the Ashes, we talked about it. But I want to be honest with listeners. I think it's really important. But we just don't make a big deal of it. And the technology works. Lots of listeners and lots of people there say you wouldn't know unless you knew that I wasn't there. So I've been, a lot of this happened because the pandemic has changed how we worked, and, one of the odd benefits of a terrible time for the world was the fact that I managed to keep everything. So my hours are slightly weird. I work more evenings than I used to, but it's been amazing. I've been incredibly lucky.
I mean, also football coverage in Australia has really changed the last 5 to 10 years because it really, I mean, obviously the 4 competitions that we're in, there's 4 different platform providers, television and streaming providers for each competition. And, it's really carved up. It used to be all on Fox, and then you got SBS, which is like a public broadcaster. You got a highlight show at 8:00 on a Monday night. So back in the backpacking days where you're sharing a 4-bedroom or a 2-bedroom with 9 people, you got to negotiate with everyone in the household. You can watch the highlights at 8:00 on a Monday night. And things have massively changed since then.
They have, and I think it's interesting from a fan's perspective. And I remember this when BT came in with Sky, and you're just like, I want all the football in one place. I totally understand that from a fan's perspective. And interesting, when I got the job, a few Australian viewers would be like, look, can you sort out the pricing structure? I'm like, that's sort of above that's not what I'm there to do. But I've been really enthused by, and do you know what I think is really interesting, and you will both sort of resonate with you about living overseas, is that I sort of had that kind of, not necessarily with expats, but a kind of a sort of snobbish view of football tourists, right? Football fans who aren't from, support your local club. I'm a Cambridge fan primarily. Of course, I like Spurs. But actually, if you're an Australian and you love Manchester United or you love Arsenal or whoever, and you get up on when it's a 3:00 kickoff on a Saturday and you get up at 1 a.m. or 3 a.m. or whenever it is, and you watch every game, you've got just as much right to call yourself a football fan. It just happens to be where you are. Yeah. And with the coverage, I've been so lucky because I work with Craig Foster and Mark Bosnich, who are both incredibly different but brilliant. And we get on, and the whole team is so great. So there's something great about watching football at 7 a.m. And we do the pre-match, and we get Mark Pugac does pitch side, and I get one of the mates from the pod to be the Euro expert. And then as soon as the game kicks off, the camera crew, the sound guys, everybody, makeup, we all come and sit on the sofa. Someone brings a big tray of hash browns and toasties and coffees. We just watch the game, and it's I've been so lucky that they want to cover football in the way that I do. They're not po-faced about it. They're not taking it super seriously. Obviously, there's some serious stuff, but otherwise, it's just let's enjoy the game. And I think, I've been super lucky that way.
And the time zone difference, it really does set up your whole day. Now, obviously, an afternoon match in Europe or a night, an evening kickoff, then the day ends quicker. But if you win, and you win against a rival, the smug grin you can have all day long, and you're in touch with all the fans in Sydney, wherever around, giving it large is absolutely fantastic. On the other hand, you get, I remember when that weekend we came third in that season where the 2-horse race we came third. Every gooner at my work was putting their head round their corner. Oh, it was a nightmare all day long.
Yeah, we have similar here, but the time difference isn't too bad. It's only 4 hours from the UK, so it's not as tricky here. But I'm going to drop in my first Sandro anecdote now.
I love how contrived it is. It's like, no, this is okay, right? It's time for a Sandro anecdote. Okay, it's like, don't have to subtly thread it into the conversation. There should just be a klaxon with his face that goes, Sandro anecdote. I'm listening.
The words Brendan and subtle don't really go in the same sentence anyway. But come on then, Brendan, off you go.
All right, so I'll ease you in with a nicer one, because the last one I want to tell is a bit X-rated. But so Sandro and I we've been mates for a couple of years now. Sort of during lockdown, I was flying from Brazil to the UK to see my dad, and at the time Brazil was red list, so you had to stay in a hotel and pay for it in Heathrow, like the Renaissance or whatever. And my mates used to work at the Renaissance. I'm from nearby Heathrow. It's a shit hotel. It sounded horrible, and to pay 1,600 quid for it. So we'd had Sandro on the pod previously and sort of kept in touch. And so I was flew to UK via Lisbon, and there was no restrictions in Lisbon. You had to self-quarantine, etc., but it wasn't rigid. So found a nice Airbnb, did a PCR after 5 days, sorted. And so met up with Sandro and sort of arranged to meet him, and he picked me up in his actually no, this is the X-rated one. Okay, we'll do the X-rated one. He picked me up in his car, and we went to his condominium. He's building a house. He lives in Setúbal, just outside of Lisbon, and we had a great time. And I bought some stuff for him to sign because some of the guys from the pod wanted signed pictures, and I didn't have a Spurs shirt. So I bought a Brazil shirt. And so he's like, do you want to sign it to Brendan from Sandro? I was like, yeah, but can you write the words Kuhosho on it? And he's like, what? And he's like, yeah, my kind of nickname's Kuhosho. And he's like, Kuhosho in Portuguese means purple anus. And he was like, your nickname's purple anus. So I sort of explained to him that like 7-8 years prior, my dad had come to Brazil, and we were having drinks with my Brazilian friends. It was a bit of a language, but I'm sure you have the same in Australia. So the conversation, the conversation just wasn't flowing. So we were drinking and like saying cheers in different languages. So we're saying, in Portuguese it's saúde, in England it's cheers, and my dad, in Ireland it's sloncha. And I have a friend called Fuka who's Japanese Brazilian. He said, in Japan it's kuhosho, which it isn't. It's purple anus. So my dad's like kuhosho. So every time we have a drink, we always say kuhosho instead of cheers. So he understood. He got the story. So he signed it. Here's the signed shirt, by the way. So
very good.
That's great.
Lovely.
And I got it back to Brazil, and so told the missus, and said, I can't wait to put it in a frame and hang it. And she's like, you mad? I was like, why not? I got him to sign. He's like, you can't hang that up. We rent the house out. We can't. But I was like, he played for Brazil 17 times. He's just like, look, if you get a purple anus from Neymar or Pele, we'll talk. I was like, when's that ever going to happen? So what did he want? Anyway, sorry about that. Had to drop that one in.
No, I'm pleased. I'm glad. I feel like I've learned something I've learned specifically about Sandro writing the words purple anus, which I wasn't necessarily expecting.
There we go. And there was a language lesson as well at 7 in the morning.
Nice.
Yeah, perfect. So it's the international break. Max, have you been watching much of the games? Did you watch the England games?
Yeah. So the pods are all on, so we're covering all the England stuff. And I've been a big sort of Southgate, supporter / apologist. That he is our second most successful manager ever, and I think he deserves the right to take the team to the World Cup. Clearly, we're not playing brilliantly. The Germany game was fun. the Italy game was really boring. I think there was a hubris around England fans. So I get very defensive because a lot of England fans just presume England should win the World Cup, and you're like, on what basis? On what evidence do you have? We've done it once. There are other countries in the world who also like football, right? Like, winning a tournament is hard. But that said, England have been a bit shit recently. Will we win the World Cup? Probably not. Could we? Maybe. It's unlikely, but I go in with optimism. It's obviously caveated by the fact that the World Cup shouldn't be in Qatar. We're obviously going to cover it a lot on the pod about the human rights abuses and the treatment of LGBTQ plus community in Qatar. Not just whether it's safe for gay fans to go over there, but just the people who actually live there. Yeah. And obviously the infrastructure is completely mad for anybody who wants to go. Like getting a beer is hard. Obviously, you have to be culturally sensitive. If booze is illegal in a country, then booze is illegal. Fine, but you can get it, but it's 15 quid a pint and it can only be Budweiser. Okay, that's probably not for me. And being the broadcasters have put like a premium on the World Cup rights. So actually, if you're in Qatar, you might not be able to see the other games because your hotel might not have paid to get the game. So you watch go to the England game, you might not be able to watch the other one. So the whole thing is a disaster. I'm not a huge fan of anything much that FIFA has done. And, having said that, we'll work on it. We're going to try and get the balance right on the pod of talking about those things. I think with the Russia World Cup, we and a lot of other people were guilty of going, bad stuff happens in Russia. We've said that, now we can just enjoy the football without thinking about it. It's even more pertinent here because, people have died building those stadiums, right? So you're watching football matches in places where the working conditions have been terrible and people have lost their lives, and you have to acknowledge that. And trying to get that balance between doing that, but also watching the football, because people are engaged by the World Cup. Of course they are. It's still the World Cup. And I think, sort of paraphrasing Barney Ronnie here, if you can still enjoy the football, because if you stop doing that, then basically you're sort of you're letting them win, right? You still own football. Football isn't owned by these people. Fans own football. But England probably won't win the World Cup is the short answer to that question.
Yeah. Just, I know you've just woken up there, but the Brazil game against Tunisia, that was fun. First half was absolutely bonkers. It finished 5-1 in the end, but the first half was 4-1. Shithousery everywhere. It was glorious. And mainly for the Tunisians, they just love to wind Neymar up, and Neymar's used to it now, so he wasn't rising to it as much. And 4-1, Richarlison scored again. Richarlison, before I go on to Davo, how do you love Richarlison? Because I bloody love Richarlison.
Yeah, and he adds something. I think it's really interesting having four really good forward players. And, stressing about who you pick, right? I think that's a really positive thing. And I think he does add something. I think it's really hard to know who. I would probably have him on the bench at the moment. And I think that might be really harsh, especially the way Sonny, scored that hat-trick. Because Kane is pretty much undroppable. Although I wouldn't mind him being taken off occasionally, and I think Kulusevski's an incredibly skillful player. But, what Richarlison adds, and his press is amazing, right? Defensively, he's ridiculous, which sounds maybe counterintuitive, but football fans watch it in a slightly different way now, don't they? And he adds so much energy, and that competition as well clearly is important, right? It clearly matters that, those three players don't think they're automatically going to start. And we've got so many games as well. So he's been brilliant. And, he is a player who you love at your team and hate if he doesn't play for you, right? Arsenal fans will hate him, right? Absolutely hate him, right? Yes. And actually, it's almost tempting to play him for that reason on Saturday, isn't it? I don't know. I'll leave it up to Antonio Conte.
Yeah, Navo, did you watch any of the? Did you see Richarlison's goals during the international break?
No, I didn't. I mean, I didn't catch the Italy game. I caught most of the Germany game, and I think that as Max was saying, Southgate's our second most successful manager of all time. And I think what I really like what he's done is he's changed the whole culture of that team. Because, frankly, after the South Africa World Cup, when Terry did that press conference saying, I was born to do this, Capello, all of that was a disaster. And Southgate's worked really, really hard on kind of bridging the team and the English public. And he's done a great job about that. And I think that you have to look at what he took over. He took over Sam Allardyce's one-game reign, and he took us to a World Cup semi-final and a Euros final. I just kind of suspect that his big game management is a bit like Pochettino's. I think he fails to adapt to situations in big games and does his tactics accordingly. So I think, we're not going to win the World Cup. I never thought we would win the World Cup. But I think that it's interesting that, people are calling for his head now and things like that. They've got very short memories. But I think once the Qatar World Cup's done, he'll be gone. I think he'll resign. But I mean, just back to Brazil for a minute. And what's the feeling in Brazil about the World Cup, Brendan, in regards to do they think that they're going to win it? And what's the feeling in Brazil about having the World Cup hosted in Qatar as well?
I think there is a lot of optimism here in terms of Brazil's chances. The game today was superb. The assist from Richarlison for Rafinha's second was beautiful. The goals were really good. It was just they're so technically gifted and they have a good real togetherness. And I spoke about this on the YouTube yesterday, that a lot of it is about creating that unity and tactics and everything that can commit it. But when it comes, that's why I always wanted Harry Redknapp to manage England, because he'd just get everyone going in the right direction. And look at the managers that have won it. Deschamps, who's the ball sniffer guy, the German guy. Joachim Low, thank you. They're old school managers, so they're not like your Jurgen Klopps and stuff. So I don't think that the tactical side is as important as that togetherness. And I think Southgate has given that. There's a lot to that. But back to Brazil, in terms of the human rights element to the games going ahead, in Brazil, there was a lot of controversy with the Brazilian World Cup for a start, and certainly with the corruption and all of the stadiums that are now white elephants, just lining the pockets of engineering and construction firms out, and politicians, obviously. So there was huge outcry then. To this one, they don't really mention it as much. Not that I've seen as much of it in terms of Qatar's sort of suitability to host the next World Cup. And that's my fear as well, Max, like you were saying, is that perhaps like we did with Russia, that we were like, once the football got going, we did kind of forget about the other stuff. We're like, the football's on, and the football was really good in Russia. So it just kind of quietened those voices. Do you think that will repeat itself, that once the football gets going, it's stuff?
I think it will. I think, it's interesting. A lot of people, when you talk about that, and you talk about human rights, and people say, why don't you boycott? An interesting Amnesty have said you shouldn't boycott. It's too late now to do that. What you need to do is know that a lot of people covering the World Cup won't talk about it. In the UK, in Australia, wherever, in Brazil. So if you have a platform and a profile and an opportunity to do that, you should shine a light on these things. Now, obviously, like, the news cycle moves quickly, doesn't it? Right? And so in 6 months' time, I am not going to be talking about human rights in Qatar. That's not because I don't care. It's just because I'm talking about other things. I'm talking about the end of the Premier League season. I'm talking about other things that are happening. So you have a responsibility to talk about it when you have the chance to do it. In the same way that, when Ukraine played Scotland in that playoff, Ukraine, if you think about that war, was absolutely top of the news agenda for a long time, right? It really was. And I'm as guilty as everyone. I was listening to the BBC Ukraine cast for about, 3-4 weeks. And then it doesn't make you a bad person that other life takes over. And your life takes over, then the news changes, and then you're talking about the British government or whatever. So that when Ukraine played Scotland again, it brought those stories back again to how important football was to the people in Ukraine, and et cetera, et cetera. And it almost is a shame that Ukraine didn't qualify for the World Cup, because that would have, sounds so ridiculous, but it would have, every time they played a match, people would have talked about it. People would have talked about what's happening. All you can do, I think, is talk about these issues, try and do it in a balanced way, try and get people's voices on that wouldn't necessarily be heard. And also know what your limitations are, right? As a football broadcaster, I'm a football broadcaster. That obviously covers all parts of life now, but you also have to do what people want, also escapism, which is what football is, which is why it makes things like Newcastle's ownership very difficult for fans, because, I'm far enough away from Cambridge United now. If a rogue state, if that's the right phrase, bought Cambridge, I could walk away. I would hate to do it. Or if they bought Spurs, I would be like, okay, I'm done, wash my hands with it. But that's much harder if you go week in, week out, or if you are or it's part of your ritual and your routine. But all these things, it's very complex because what people want who work hard every week and go to football is that to be the place where they don't have to worry about these things. But actually, all parts of human life, fall into. I wrote a piece without getting too bleak about domestic violence and sexual violence. It's a huge problem with that within football. You can't really talk about it for so many legal reasons. But that means no one talks about it. And it's it's a thing that people should address because, it's really grim. But at the same time, you just want 2 hours a week where you don't have to think about all these sort of tough things because existences can be quite bleak, I guess. I mean, I'm quite an optimist. I don't need to bring the tone down, the mood down. But I feel that with Qatar as well. We have a responsibility to cover it properly, and hopefully we will.
Yeah, and David Beckham being the ambassador just left a really sour taste.
Totally,
he didn't need the money. He doesn't need the money. 150 million. Who cares? Do you know what I mean?
But he queued up at 2 a.m. and he made sure everyone knew about it, didn't he? So he's he wants that knighthood badly, and there were those leaked emails about how badly he wants that knighthood.
I was really disappointed that he took that money. And Eric Cantona's done a piece with Adam Kraft in The Athletic, an interview, and Cantona calls him out. And, I don't know how many people close to him call him out, but it's different to a player going because, you are playing rather than just taking the money. And a bit like the Live Golf Tour, right? I judge somebody on the breadline who takes money from a tricky regime in a much different way to somebody who is a multi-millionaire getting even more multi-millions of pounds, right? There's a limit to how much you need. So well done to Cantona for calling Beckham out, frankly.
I didn't know that. Fair play to Cantona. So on in terms of the favourites, who do you reckon will win it then, Max?
No idea. I mean, probably Brazil or just someone that isn't England, but I don't know. I haven't been watching enough of every country to know who's in the best form. A lot of the big European sides aren't, but that doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really mean anything, does it? You need a lucky draw. You need to be lucky, and you need to, there's obviously more to it than that because England just don't ever win it. But I have no idea.
Davo?
Well, you've got to probably look at the French, don't you? It's an unimaginative choice, but I think that they've still got good players, and it's going to be an interesting one because obviously Italy's not there, Germany are not looking that great, but maybe the Danish. I mean, the Belgians are, that generation's really getting on. Everyone talks about it's their last chance at each tournament. So that there's them as well, but maybe we'll see a left to centre team win it. Who knows? It's a strange one because it's going back to the Qatar thing, and maybe there was less focus on it on Russia than in Qatar. But the difference with Qatar is that it's not known as a footballing nation, which Russia clearly is. We didn't have to break up the season into two bits, and I was just listening to the guys on YouTube last night, watching them on YouTube, and I think Seb made a very good point. Is that there's been none of those pre-tournament friendlies where you play a team with the same kind of style of the teams you're playing. You had this Euro Nations thing, and then you're straight into it. I think that the season finishes, and 8 days later, the first game starts. So I think it could throw up a surprise nation who might win it in that context.
Yeah, I still think Brazil is going to win it, but I'm screwed though because the only Brazil shirt I have is this one.
Here we go.
I can't wear it out.
You'll be parading the purple anus Brazil t-shirt everywhere you go if they win it. Fantastic.
I can wear it in the house. That's it. I can't wear that out. All right. Anyway, look. So let's move on to Tottenham. We are running out of time here. So, Max, last time you were on was during lockdown, I believe, when Jose was manager. We've kicked on a lot since then. A lot's happened. Are you happy with where Spurs are at the moment, just in general, as opposed to sort of coming?
Yeah, of course. They're doing really well. They win on Saturday, go top of the league, right? I still don't know how well we're playing. I think Conte is quite a defensive man. There are quite a lot of similarities between Conte and Mourinho, apart from he doesn't throw his players under the bus, and we are winning games. We look and we've invested, right? Like bought player. The squad is, like the signings have been good, and that has been a real surprise. I'm sure you talked about it before about, Daniel Levy saying, okay, we will spend that much money on a potentially substitute striker. We'll bring in, cover. There is depth. There's more than one player for every position. That's great. The thing I love the most is that I thought Ben Davies was cooked 2-3 years ago. Absolutely cooked. All that he did was stand there with a throw-in and just looking annoyed at everyone because no one was in space for him to throw to him, just looking annoyed. And he's been absolutely brilliant on the left side of that three. Like, really, I'm so impressed with him. I think Dyer's been superb. I really like Kulusevski. I wonder about our midfield. I think Bentancur looks like a wonderful footballer, but I still worry that we don't have that player that can pick a pass. And so I actually think games like Arsenal, where teams will come onto you, actually suit Tottenham much more than, teams that are defensive. And I think they were quite lucky in a few of their games. I think Wolves were better than Tottenham for a long time, part of that game. Chelsea obviously battered us, if we're honest. I'm unconvinced, yet I guess I could probably be unconvinced for the whole season that Tottenham could actually be really successful, because I think what's interesting is Tottenham can win unconvincingly against Fulham, but they can also win unconvincingly against Manchester City, right? And they've done that quite a few times because they have that ability. So I think I'm sort of cautiously optimistic. I find it's sort of like some of the football is quite boring, but maybe, like, my dad's 83 now, and I'm sort of saying to him, maybe it's worth having like a couple of years of boring, successful football, and then go back to someone else and it's really fun, as you've had for your entire life, and we win a trophy, because it would just be nice to see Harry Kane not have to trudge around a pitch applauding with a loser's medal,
Again.
It's sad, yeah. Again, this thing though, we are, as you said, boring, but also we've scored the second most goals after Man City. So it's bizarre. It's just a weird one. Davo, we'll look at Arsenal now and sort of bring it closer to the current time. How are you feeling ahead of Arsenal? I'm not optimistic, I'll be honest. I normally am, and we lose. And now I'm not, so I'm hoping that we win on that logic. But where are you?
Look, we've gone into these North London derbies before at their place where they have been playing appallingly. And, you've got the Gooners air squadron with your Wenger in, Wenger out banners all over the place in the skyline. And I think that, but they are in good form now. Now, everyone has said they've started well, but they've had easy opposition. But they've still bettered some of their results from last season. So they've gone to Palace away and they've won. They went to Brentford away and they've won, which is better results than they got last season. They've looked to fix some of their issues in the transfer market. I still don't rate Arteta as a manager. We all have a good laugh about him on the cheese room for the various things that he does. And I was delighted he got a contract extension before the 3-0 at the end of last season. But if anyone thinks that it's going to be straightforward because we did them last year and we took fourth, that's been and gone. I would be happy if we went there and got a draw. We've got an appalling record there. We've won twice away in the Premier League at Arsenal and once only at the Emirates. All I want to do is make sure that we turn up, because we didn't turn up against Chelsea. We really got away with one against Chelsea. So I really want us to turn up, give them a game, and if we come away with a draw, I'll be happy.
I think Arteta is a good manager, and I didn't think he was. And I think they play really lovely football. And I think they've got a real, the balance of that side looks great. A bit like Ben Davies, right? Granit Xhaka, who I thought was cooked, is actually playing really well. Odegaard is a wonderful footballer. I don't know who's fit and suspended and all that, but Jesus has been absolutely brilliant for them, as has Zinchenko. I think it's really hard to call. It's one of those games where we'll sit deep, I imagine, and we could win 4-0 on the counter. They could win 4-0, or it'd probably be a 1-1 draw.
Yeah.
God, that's it. I mean, I predicted 2-2 draw with this one. And in terms of the personnel, Max, we finished the Leicester game with 5 in midfield, which we've been screaming out for a lot. That we do kind of see possession in midfield to play those wing backs, but he thickened it up. He did get Bissouma in there, who played quite well against. I mean, Leicester were cooked already, but do you think that that's somewhere where he may go, or that he'll be rigid with his 3-4.
I mean, he is rigid. He is rigid. He's not changing that. I don't think for anything. I think you could probably write the starting lineup now, pretty much. Yeah. Certainly, Højbjerg and Bentancur. And I think Højbjerg's a really interesting case, isn't it? Where I think he probably is quite good, but it sort of feel like he isn't in a funny kind of way, right? But actually, he's got a real sort of engine of that team. I think it's really fascinating how that matchup is fascinating. I think they're both good in very different ways, but I don't see Conte changing at all. I think he'll try and stifle the game for as long as he can, and then a couple of quick breaks and see what we can do. That would be, and that's probably the right thing to do against Arsenal, right? Is to let them come onto you. They're better on the ball than we are, right? Like moving the ball forwards and playing forward passes is not something that we do a whole lot. Which is counterintuitive for a team that scores lots of goals.
But just on the current mood and Davo, Sonny's back. He's back scoring. He's back smiling. I was at the Leicester game, and I'm going to lead into my next anecdote quickly. But just before I do, how good is it that Sonny's back firing? Because it just makes a huge difference to how we look up front.
Well, when you say you're leaning into your next anecdote, I'm presuming you mean your next Sandro anecdote, not just a general anecdote, just to be clear. Look, I thought that I was in Sydney when I watched the Leicester game. I watched it blind at like 5 a.m. or whatever. And when he scored, I felt a little bit emotional as well, because you could tell the relief in the stadium. And when he scored, it wasn't like old Chrissy Armstrong when he got the hump with the crowd and refused to celebrate with them anymore after I think he had a bit of a falling out. It meant the world to him, and the second and the third, and it's great to see. But I've got a soft spot for him. I took my kids to their first game, went over from Sydney to the old White Hart Lane, and he scored his first goal against Palace. It was great, but against Sporting Lisbon, that was an appalling performance he put in. He was terrible, and I thought he played well first half West Ham. He looked lively against Fulham. So, but for him to get the goals in was great. I temper it with it's against the worst defence in the league. But it's great to see him get a hat-trick. I really want him to follow it up with a decent performance against the Gooners. I'm not looking for a hat-trick or anything like that, but I want him to give the Gooners some problems in that game. And to see him kind of produce it now. Now he's got that off his back, I think, psychologically, and we all hope that he's going to be on fire and go on one of his runs.
So you mentioned Sporting Lisbon there as well, which
here we go. I've got to start solo parenting in 2 minutes, right? So
okay.
I really want a big payoff on this Sandro anecdote. Right?
So we were setting up to go to the Leicester game together, Sandro and I. Whilst we were talking, he said, Brent, because he lives in Lisbon. So, Brent, we're playing Sporting Lisbon next week. Do you want me to talk to Richarlison to try and get some tickets? He's mates with Richarlison through Aurelio Gomez. And because
who isn't friends with someone through Aurelio Gomez? So this is an important point to make.
So, do you want me to get some tickets? I was like, yeah. I said, look, I know it's fine if you don't, but I've never been to a Champions League game, never been to an away game. So he's like, leave it with me, I'll sort it out. So then the next day, he's like, Bren, I spoke to Lucas. I just think Lucas has better admin skills than Richarlison. Spoke to Lucas, got the tickets, it's on. So to book the tickets, went to Lisbon, met up with some guys from the podcast, met Richarlison, and we met outside the ground, got the tickets and went in, and we were sitting in with the Sporting Lisbon fans, but in front of the Tottenham development squad. So he was posting a lot on social media, and the development squad came along, as did Chris Powell. And I was like, I saw Chris, I went up to him. I think my words were, wow, Chris Powell. Because he's a Premier League legend, and Sandro is too. But I was just in awe of being in the presence of Chris Powell. And yeah, so
I've got to say, sorry, I've got to stop you there. I mean, Chris Powell's a wonderful man and a good bloke. But if you're in awe of Chris Powell, there must be a lot of people you're in awe of.
Yeah, probably. I don't meet many footballers. I don't think this is why I make such a big deal of my friendship with Sandro. I don't meet many footballers. No. So that was the Sporting Lisbon game, and we lost, and it was terrible. I didn't care. I just had the most amazing time with watching the game with Sandro. We had beers outside afterwards, and he didn't make it to the Leicester game. His flight was cancelled, and it didn't happen. He was supposed to come to Leicester. It didn't happen, which I was devastated about. But we will always have Lisbon.
So now you send me a little run sheet, and it has 3 Sandro anecdotes. All I'm saying is it's good that you've got one in the bank to tease forward to the next pod. Is how I feel about that.
Yeah, I'm out actually as well, but I can think of another one, but I am out. Before we wrap up, let's get predictions. Max, what do you think the score will be against the Gooners?
3-0 Tottenham.
Davo, how are you feeling?
Sorry, 1-1. 1-1.
I went 2-2, so I'm going to stick with that. We never win there. It's always going to be that way. And so just before we wrap up, we do need to mention our friends at footballprizes.co.uk. This week's prize is a Ledley King signed and framed shirt. The tickets are on sale now, and with your promo code CHEESE10, that's the word cheese and 10, you get a 10% discount on your tickets, and good luck with that. Max, I can hear Ian Rushden. There's Ian. Bless him. I can hear him going off. Max, thank you so much for joining. We can't wait to have you back on again.
Pleasure.
Davo, thanks for joining, mate.
Absolute pleasure.
Cool, cheeseheads. Do watch out for the YouTube, which will be out on Friday from Caller and the gang, and also there will be a review of the Arsenal game from Franco and likely myself over the weekend. So do listen out for that. And as ever,
the third Sandro anecdote, of course.
And I've got to think of the third one. There's got to be one. Yeah, we had a risotto off.
No. I don't want to hear it. Save it for the next one. That's the key. Save it.
And as ever, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.